Hi everybody, welcome to the last module of the class. We're on Module 5, Policies Affecting the Elderly, and then we'll also talk about how to create a policy brief. So we're almost there, it's the home stretch, so just hang in there with me. For this week, what you will have to do is obviously watch this mini lecture, which you're doing right now. The PowerPoint that I'm using for this lecture is located right here, so if you wanted to reference that while you're taking the quiz or working on your assignment, you certainly can. The policies that we'll be looking at that specifically impact the elderly population are Medicare and supplemental security income. So those are the two policies we'll be looking at, and there are documents right here for each of those policies that you will be asked to read. And then in addition to that, I also have 4 documents down here that pertain specifically to policy briefs and how to write them, as well as examples for policy briefs that you can use as you work on your assignment for this week. At the bottom, you can, of course, access the assignments. The quiz is located right here, and the assignment is right next to it. So let me now open up our PowerPoint. So here's our PowerPoint. Again, we're focusing on the elderly population as well as creating policy briefs. Before we start talking about the 2 policies in question, I'd just like to give you some demographic information related to the elderly population. So by 2030, it's expected that 20% of the U.S. residents will be age 65 and older. That's compared to 13% in 2010 and 9.8% in 1970. So again, we're on a steep increase of individuals who are age 65 and over, and by 2030, again, 20%, so about 1 in 5 U.S. residents will be age 65 and older. Since our population is aging at a pretty high rate, what that means is that all social workers, regardless of what agency or part of the social work field that you'll be in, you will be in contact with elderly individuals at one point in time or another. So it is really important for us in order to serve our clients well, we need to be familiar with both Medicare and supplemental security income. So let's start by talking about Medicare briefly. As you know, in these mini lectures, what I'm going to do is just give you a very quick overview, and then you can get a more in-depth understanding of the policy as you read through the materials for this week. So for Medicare, Medicare is a federal health insurance program. It is intended for individuals who are 65 years of age and older. It is also intended for certain younger people who have disabilities, as well as people with end-stage renal disease. So those are the 3 populations that are primarily served by Medicare. And again, the intent of Medicare is to provide a health insurance program for these individuals. Supplemental security income, or also known as SSI, is a federal income supplement program that's funded by general tax revenues. SSI is intended to help people age 65 and older, or individuals who are blind or disabled who have little or no income. So SSI is income-based, so it is for individuals with low income, and this program provides cash assistance to those individuals in order to help meet the basic needs such as food, clothing, and shelter. So the main goal of SSI is to provide cash assistance, so income assistance, to individuals who are age 65 and older, or individuals who are blind and disabled. Aside from these 2 policies, like I said, the other thing that I would like to talk with you about this week is policy briefs. The policy brief is going to be the last written assignment that you complete for this class. Policy briefs are extremely important. They do require a kind of a unique set of writing skills. Policy briefs need to be extremely concise. Again, we don't want them to be more than 1 page in length. You want to be very much to the point in this document, and you don't want to use any jargon. It needs to be a document that can be read by anybody, even individuals who have no area of specialization in the topic that you're discussing. This document should provide an overview of the social problem as well as recommendations on how to address that social problem. The reason why policy briefs are so important is because oftentimes policymakers do not have time to conduct their own extensive research on social issues and policies. And so rather than conducting their own research, what they do is they rely on policy briefs to provide them with the facts and the data in a very digestible way. And so they can then use those policy briefs to inform their decisions on certain policy making issues. So again, the goal here is to provide, in that policy brief, to provide policymakers with an overview of the facts and the recommendations on how to proceed so that the policymakers can use those documents as the foundation for their decision-making process. It is very important when you write policy briefs to base it entirely on facts. None of this should be opinion-based. Since policymakers do use these documents very heavily, they rely on them very heavily as they make decisions, it's important that those decisions are rooted in fact. If a policymaker uses somebody's policy brief and finds out that the author of that policy brief was not using facts, then they will not rely on that particular author anymore. So if you really do want to have an impact on the community and impact on policy change, then it's of the utmost importance that you use integrity when you're writing these policy briefs. The audience for policy briefs can be anybody that's involved in the decision-making process, in the policy decision-making process. So that could be an elected official. It could also be the head of an organization. It could be the press, the media, think tanks, etc. Again, you do not want to exceed 1 page for these policy briefs. For this module, you are being asked to create a policy brief, and so I wanted to give you an outline and an example of a policy brief. For the outline here, the first thing you provide, and again, this is the outline you should follow when you work on your assignment for this week. You should obviously provide a title. That title should be very short, catchy, and informative. Then your next, the first bullet in your executive in this policy brief is your executive summary. So it's a 2 to 3 sentence statement that sums up the entire brief. It should use recognizable buzzwords and emphasize the relevance of the research to policy. So you're really trying to draw your reader in those first few sentences. Then I need you to give me an introduction and a scope of the problem. So explain the policy issue and why it is particularly important or current. With this section, you're trying to convince your reader that policy action or change is necessary. After that, you'll give the results or the existing literature on that social problem. So you're going to provide an overview of the existing research in a very accessible, understandable way. The brief is intended for, again, for non-specialists, so you don't want to include complicated jargon. A policy actor wants to see factual data that comes from reputable sources. So again, you're not making anything up, you're not providing opinions, you're rooting all of this in fact-based information. Then you'll give a conclusion. In the conclusion, you reinforce the key message to take away from the policy brief. And remember that the executive summary is where typical conclusion content is. So do not simply repeat what you gave in the executive summary sentence. Here you really want to provide a conclusion instead. Then you'll provide your policy recommendations at the end of this policy brief. So you're going to try and make only one feasible policy recommendation. You don't want to muddy the water by providing multiple policy recommendations. So try to make just one. If you are making more than one recommendation, then differentiate them clearly. So for instance, use bullet points or number them. Definitely only make a maximum of 3 recommendations. And then finally, you'll provide references and suggested sources. You want to use your references sparingly because you don't want to overwhelm the reader, but you do want to make sure that your sources are reputable in nature. So this is the outline that I want you to use when you write your policy brief on the topic that you've chosen for this particular week. Before we end this mini lecture, I will pull up an example of a policy brief as well. But before we do that, I just very quickly want to go over your expectations for this module. So again, just to ensure that we're all on the same page, for this week, you will be watching and reading all of the materials that are located under Module 5. So that includes this lecture. It includes the supplemental materials about Medicare and SSI. And in addition, you'll read the advocacy tools materials that are related to policy briefs. Once you have watched and read all of these materials, you will then complete the assignments. That includes, as usual, the multiple choice quiz, and that then also includes for this week your policy brief. Let me now go back to our Canvas site right here. So what I would like you to take note of is here on our Canvas site under Module 5, it says Advocacy Tools Policy Brief, and you'll see there are 4 documents in here. The first 2 talk about how to plan and write an effective policy brief, an overview of a policy brief. But then the third one here says Policy Brief Example, Federal Mandate for Infertility Treatment Coverage. And I wrote between parentheses, this is the one that I want you to use as your guide when you create your policy brief. So I'm going to click on it very quickly. This is the outline. This is the format that I want you to use. So this is a really good example for you to go by. So please reference this. This one in particular is about infertility treatment. Obviously, that might not be your topic, but use this as a guide as you work on your policy brief. And then also just want to show you, if you do click on the assignment button, this is what you'll see. It does give you this outline that I would like for you to use. So again, title, executive summary, an introduction, scope of the problem, the results or existing literature on this social problem, conclusions, policy recommendations, and then the references and suggested sources. So please use this exact outline for your paper and make sure that you include these subheadings in your paper. That will really facilitate the process. It makes it easier for your reader to consume the document when you have these types of headings. Just as you could see on this sample here, you can see that they used policy headings, and that can be very, very helpful. Okay, that's it. I'll just go right back to Module 5 just in case. Yep, that concludes our mini lecture for this module, and that is the last mini lecture for this entire course. If you have any questions for me, obviously feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to help you in any way that I can. Have a great week. Enjoy this last week of class, and it's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. Bye.